Hej och varmt välkomna hit ikväll. We will be hosting this evening's talk in English, and for those of you who have not met me before, my name is Lisa Hydén and I am Director of Exhibitions here at Fotografiska Stockholm. I could not be more proud than I am today as we're opening Shirin Neshat's exhibition, The Fury. And a little fun fact is that this exhibition will be traveling to Fotografiska Berlin in 2024. And we're thrilled to open Fotografiska Berlin here in a few weeks' time, in September. We will be filming this talk tonight, and afterwards, for those of you who didn't have time to go and see the exhibition, you can go downstairs. So, I am not so often starstruck when it comes to most things, but sometimes it happens. And with this particular artist, when I see the work that she's creating, how she holds her voice so clear, focused, brave, the way that she gathers poetry, music, strong collaborations, gathering talents of others, I must say that happens to me. So here tonight with us from New York, please help me welcome Shirin Neshat. So Shirin, you will be keeping the presentation for tonight, and we're so pleased to have you here. I would like to start with asking you a little bit about your upbringing. You were born in the 1950s in Iran, and from there your life has taken you routes which are both very unexpected, but could perhaps also be a bit expected. And with that meant, I mean that you have your own personal background, but you also have collectively shared experiences. Would you like to share a little bit about your upbringing?
Can you hear me okay? First of all, I want to say thank you for being here tonight, and it's such a pleasure to be back to Sweden. I wanted to thank Fotografiska because the exhibition happened in collaboration together, and there's so many Iranians here. Thank you for coming and supporting me, and all of my Swedish friends. Without going into too much detail, because I think it would take a long time to explain my personal history. But I was born in 1957 to a very loving family in a small city. Azvin is not that small, but it's perhaps the third most religious city in Iran. And what I want to mention about what is important about my upbringing is that I was raised in a city that was very conservative, extremely religious, but my family was very much the opposite. They were very progressive, very educated. And my father was a physician, he had a farm, and he was very forward-thinking and very modern man, and his idea was not really in line of the city where I grew up. So a part of me as a human being, as a young child, was at school, everything was so, it really represented a very conservative religious community. But at home, everybody was wearing miniskirts and playing cards and drinking and everything. So this describes to you this kind of duality that I grew up in Iran. Which is my generation, I think, a footing in the past and a part of Iranian identity, which was being religious, being traditional, but a part of us Iranians who wanted to belong to the rest of the world, to what Reza Shah, the father of Shah, did in 1940s, which was to modernize the country. And so there was this conflict between tradition and modernity. And I think I myself had a tendency to be attracted to religion. I was very interested in hearing the Quranic chant, and I always felt guilty seeing my family drinking because I thought, oh, we are all going to hell. So I remember as a child growing up in this beautiful garden, beautiful home, but I always felt something was upsetting me because I wasn't sure if I was a good Muslim or a bad Muslim, and where I belonged. And unfortunately, my childhood was very happy, but unfortunately, things fell apart when my father decided to send us away to study because, again, he really believed in education and the Western culture, and he sent myself, my sisters and brothers outside. And when I came to the US, I think for me it was not the image of Hollywood that I had expected. It was a very sad and devastating period for me as a young person who lost home and the connection with the community, to now Los Angeles, and soon after there was the revolution, and I didn't see them for the next 11 years. So my story, in a way, is not so unique. I think while I was young, underground, there was the brewing of the revolution. A lot of the people of my generation were political activists. Many of my friends were activists. And I think part of the reason maybe my father sent me abroad was because he was worried about, he was projecting what was happening in the future in Iran. And so there was that tendency of young people who were against the Shah and pro-Khomeini, or actually many students who were not even religious. It was the change of the government. And meanwhile, I left and the revolution happened while I was gone. But it was a good story that turned, unfortunately, a bit tragic because I didn't see them for a long time and eventually lived in exile. So I think the story of me is the story of many Iranian people.
And when we see, since the 1990s, it seems that you have not stopped for a second. You have been working, you've held numerous museum, gallery shows, working both with still image, multiple short images, but you're also award-winning director of 3 full-length films. You work with many different tools of expression. Could you share a little bit when you come with an idea and when you start planning a project, how do you choose between your different methods of expression?
But to get to that, I think I need to give a little background because I did go to UC Berkeley at California. I was a very bad student. And it was because during the revolution, I couldn't focus on my education. And therefore, I stopped making arts from the time that I graduated until I moved to New York, where I worked for 10 years at a job. So I was already 31 when I became a serious artist. So I basically was paralyzed emotionally, psychologically, because of separation from the family and isolation in a new country. Art was not something in my vocabulary, and I had decided I didn't want to be an artist. But later on, eventually, I went to Iran, finally, in 1990s, and was reunited, and the consequent trips led to the desire to being an artist again. And I think when I look back at my work, whether it's a photograph or a video or a movie, they're very personal, and there are work that somehow integrates my own story and my own struggle as an Iranian immigrant and my own emotions of displacement, anxiety, fear, vulnerability, with issues that are much above and beyond my singular existence. So whether I'm doing a photograph, which I started with photography and I was all doing self-portrait, I know you want to get to these. These are my first group of work. Why is it not advancing? Maybe I moved to New York, which is, as you know, the capital of the art world, and I think I was very influenced by my education and eventually meeting incredible artists like Cindy Sherman to fantastic artists, and yet my heart was in Iran. And my return to Iran and my desire to reconnect to my country, to my family, became the groundwork for the work that I made called The Woman of Allah, which basically questioned the revolution. So basically, I started photographing myself. The text became poetry by Iranian women poets. And the subject of it was essentially questioning issues relation to the revolution, and more specifically, the subject of martyrdom, the question of how men and women were willing to sacrifice their lives and the material world for their faith, and ultimately this obsession with death. This series, which hopefully you can just advance with your hand, just so we can get to the next thing. This series became very big, called Woman of Allah, and it's one of the most misunderstood work of mine. Many Iranian people, and actually even Western critics, thought that I was supporting the Iranian regime or the revolution, but I was really just raising the question. And so now that you wanted me to go quicker to video work and film, so for several years I made this very controversial photographs, which essentially I photographed myself, and it was the relationship between the body, which is very problematic, a woman's body in Islam, as you know, the veil, which is extremely controversial, both as a symbol of repression and freedom and independence, the text, which was poetry and the kind of a voice of women of Iran, and the weapon, which was a symbol of violence. And so this series became very big, and I think I spent a few years just making the photo. Thank you. This is me when I was younger. And so they became a group of self-portraits, and I think I cannot stay with this too long because we have many things to talk about. But again, all this calligraphy were written by me on the photographs. And again, the work was extremely controversial. To this day, I think it's relevant because it talks about how the female body, particularly in Islamic culture, is a contested space, a battleground for political, religious ideology and rhetorics. Whether is, anyway, in this case, for me, it was the female body was extremely important. So these are some of the images. Just to fast forward to your question of video, because you wanted me to talk about, oh, well, maybe I go back.
And I think that it's good when you give the background of your projects. This is great.
Okay, so I want to mention before I forget that I said my work is very personal, but it's deeply historical. Most of my work, if you really look back from Woman of Allah, which was the Iranian Revolution in 1979, to my movie Woman Without Men, which was about the 1953 coup in Iran, to the Book of Kings, which was about the Green Movement in Iran in 2009. But I used the Book of Shahnameh, the ancient book by Ferdowsi, which is a long epic poem that is also about the notion of patriotism and love of nation. And I found this beautiful parallel between what was happening in the streets of Iran during the 2009, where the youth were giving their lives, and the notion of patriotism for their country, versus what Ferdowsi did in the Book of Kings, which was again Iran at the point of the Arab conquest. And again, this idea of violence, atrocity, and genocide at the moments of love of a nation. And this contradiction of love, which is the hand gesture on the heart, versus the brutality, is exactly what happens in Iran every time we have a political upheaval, which is today, women, life, freedom, as you can see, and during the Arab, sorry, not just Arab Spring, but the 2009 Green Movement. So I made this work, which became a very massive group of work. I think about 60 photographs that together told the story of the Green Movement and sort of became a tribute to this moment of history of Iran, which unfortunately was short-lived, and many of these wonderful youth were arrested, etc. And some of these images you can see were directly painted on the photographs, which I found very powerful. The notion of brutality, the beheading, the notion of Rostam or Sohrab, people who gave their lives, and what we have today of our activists who are giving their lives for their country. So again, as you can see, subconsciously I gravitate towards subjects that are very emotional, very personal, but also very historical and politically charged. This is a series I did in Egypt. I traveled to Egypt during the Arab Spring. It was a commission by Rauschenberg Foundation. I photographed number, if the Book of Kings was about young people who gave their lives, this was about the people during the Arab Spring who lost their children. So I focused mainly photographing the elderly men and women who had lost their children during the Arab Spring at the aftermath of the, the revolution. And I talked to them. There are microscopic writings on their faces, like downstairs. But it was so moving, even though I was not Egyptian and I didn't speak Arabic. But it was the first time that I began to interview my subjects, where I didn't have models, but actually I recruited people on the streets, and I was able to make the connection, and them knowing that I am also a product of a revolution, and that we have so much in common. And so these were basically average citizens, opposite to the Book of Kings, which was my friends and people from all over the Middle East. And it was a very heart-wrenching experience for me. You can see some of the writings. And some of the images were of the very morbid pictures of people who were killed in the morgues, and they go unknown. These images are extremely reminiscent of what we see in Iran today, unfortunately, and somehow. Anyway, the home of my eyes, I went to Azerbaijan. I'm an artist, a nomadic artist. I was commissioned to do a series of work in Azerbaijan, but I decided, Azerbaijan, as you know, is next to Iran, and it is a place, my mother is actually from Azerbaijan. But the theme was home, as someone who doesn't have home. And the country of Azerbaijan is a place, it's multiple ethnicities, Armenians, Caucasians, Turks, Persians, Russians, speaking different languages, they're different religions. So I did a series of work that basically photographed people from different ethnicities all living in Azerbaijan and calling it a home. The only thing was the gestures were all taken from religious paintings of El Greco from Spain. So there was this almost religious quality, and eventually was shown in Venice next to a Madonna, which was a total coincidence. But so as you can see, the inspiration came from religious paintings from the West. And this became a very large, and again, these people were not models, they were not actors, they were average citizens that I photographed. trying to go a little faster. I'm sorry, am I being too slow?
No, no, please let us know.
Talking about turning into a reporter, in 2019, I finally turned my attention to United States, where I lived the longest. And I have been, I guess, since 75, I've lived in the US, but this was the first work that I made. And basically, Land of Dreams was a group of photographs that I did in New Mexico. And it's really the story of me. This woman played me in the video and in the movie, where I went door to door to people's home and photographed people and asked them to share with me their dreams. And so it's called Land of Dreams, a country that is supposed to bring dreams true. This is the identity of this country. And actually, she's the same person who played in the video downstairs, Sheila Van. But basically, these are a series of portraits that captures America in the way that I see it. It's a country, a tapestry of different ethnicities, different races, different religions, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern, people of, again, different religions. So I went all across the country with my dear friend Julia here, different country, different states, in different cities in the state of New Mexico, because it's such a diverse state. And I photographed people in pizza parlors, in hotels and everything, but the writings and the inscriptions were Persian. And I felt that was really important for me now that I'm photographing Western people, but what remains constant is I am Iranian, and this aesthetic intervention. And this writings and the inscription, they came from a very ancient manuscript from Iran that were a loosely interpretation of dreams. So basically, Land of Dreams became a series of photographs, a video, and a movie. And this became one installation, like a portrait of America in a series of photographs, the way that it looked to me. And these are some of the other images. So this was a big step for me, not only photographing myself or Iranian people or the Egyptians, but slowly, as someone who understands I will never go back to Iran anymore, I started to open my eyes to the world and photographing subjects. And realizing that, you can take an Iranian out of Iran, but you can never take Iran out of an Iranian. So as long as I'm behind the camera, behind the story, the work is Iranian. And so I insist on that this work is very Iranian, even though it's about America from an immigrant's perspective. And the fury, we arrive. As I mentioned to you, I've had an obsession about woman's body and how they become a contested space, not only as Iranian, but all over the world. So many of us women have been sexually assaulted. We never talk about it. Women and their body as an object of desire, but an object of violence. So many of us are violated, but we never talk about it. And more so how in my culture, women, as repressed as they are, their bodies are at the very center of the ideological, religious, and political rhetorics of any government. So we are at once a victim, but at the same time so powerful that even our little hair could provoke so much turmoil and bring a government to its knees. But this particular subject, I have to tell you the story since we're in Sweden, that many of us Iranians know the Ms. Nouri, this very notorious prosecutor that was captured in Sweden. And he has been on trial, and in fact, he's in prison here. But the trial was broadcasted largely. And a year and a half ago, way before the Woman Life Freedom, I became obsessed listening to the trial and listening to the testimonies and the people who had lost their children. But I became very obsessed about the women prisoners and how perpetually in Iran, the Islamic regime, when they have political prisoners, the first thing they do, they rape them and they sexually assault them. And eventually, many of these ladies they commit suicide. And it's ironic that this has happened again during the Women Life Freedom. Many of women who were arrested, they were raped, and many of them committed suicide, and men who were raped. So, so I wanted to make a video that was quite not so directly political, but spoke about the trauma of sexual assault, not just anything, but being in prison, and how even when you're free, you're not really free, you're forever haunted. So the photographs are another subject because they were people that I photographed that were both bruised and not. These are done in my studio. I recruited people from different backgrounds, people who were willing to be naked and show their body as defiant, beautiful, strong, proud, and yet people who are in pain and violated. So again, this question of our bodies as a point of beauty, temptation, sexuality, yet sin, shame, and violence. And so this whole show is about this duality. And the writing is by Forough Farrokhzad, the beloved Iranian poet who, in her own writing, in her own way, always questioned this duality between how women, as women, we always feel ashamed about our body because we're told we're bad and we have to cover it, and and she herself, before she died, she was called a whore because she was able to so openly speak about temptation, sexuality, love, and really questioning God. And so these are intricate writings, and that myself and my friends from Iran, we painfully wrote. Oh wait, so we don't have any pictures of the video, but I think it's coming soon. But the video was really the heart of the exhibition, which for me was shot in New York, and maybe we have it later. Yeah, I think it's coming. Turbulence is a video. I don't want to exhaust you because we were supposed to have a conversation. I'm going to go real fast. A video. I moved from photography.
Yeah, I think all this is very important to get. I mean, some of our guests here, they know a bit about your artistic practice, but some of us do not have the full. So I think it's wonderful if you want to share your
just very
projects.
quickly, because we're talking about photography. It's like one frozen moment. You know, like I showed you, this one moment, tears in someone's eyes, it becomes everything. But with video and movies, you can use choreography, you can use landscape, you can use production design, you can, music is really important to me. And you can tell a story. So the picture becomes a poem, but a video or a movie becomes a story. And so the other thing is, with my photographs, they become very politically charged, and everybody's judgment becomes only about the political meaning. But with videos, it's, to me, it's like a dance. It's like doing a choreography. So these were my earlier videos, all shot in Morocco, where there was this compositions of triangles, of circles, of, like, I could be not just Iranian, I could just be an artist. I could make a video that explores the medium of video. What does it mean to have double channel projections? What does it mean to tell a story in two sides? And yet it was about Iran, the question of men and women, nature and culture. And without going too much into it, I met my current husband and my team of Iranian people. We became a family, and we started to travel all over the world. The composer, the cinematographer, the production designer, the editor. So we are a group of Iranian people working constantly since 1998 in New York. And Susan Dehim is a wonderful singer. And this is this is Hushang Tozi, an Iranian actor who I worked with. Another very stylized video that I made in Morocco. I won't get into details too much because we don't have This is a video I did with Philip Glass, the wonderful American composer. He commissioned me to do a video, and he played live with the orchestra, also shot in Morocco. I did a lot of work. I didn't make art until I was 30-something, but then once I got going, it just started to happen back and forth. Something happened in 2016 where instead of photographing myself or being in my work, I started having other women play me. And this was something I didn't realize, but Roja is a woman that I love. She's an Iranian friend of mine. She's not even an actress. But this was a video that I made based on my own dream about Iran, actually. It's like a nightmare. But I started to realize that I'm starting to have women that kind of small physique and look like me, but much younger. And I made 3 videos called Dreamers, a trilogy of 3 dreams, my own dreams. And these are some of the images. Until Sheila Vand, another muse, she also became like me. She's very small, short, and big eyes. I don't have big eyes, but Sheila Vand is an extraordinary actress. So if in the photographs in New Mexico, I went door to door and said, hi, and my Iranian friends were in the car, I'm an Iranian artist, and I was just wondering if I could take your picture. And then some people say, get lost, and some people say, yeah, come in. And then once inside, I would say, you know, we also want to know about your dreams, and could you share with me your dreams? In the video, she played me. She actually did that. We made a video where she knocked in people's doors, and people, one by one, sharing a dream. It was an extraordinary experience because some of these people are not actors. Literally, they played themselves. And so a bunch of us Iranians were in the Indian reservation, making this work that was, I'm an Iranian artist making a work, but I really like to know what was your dream. But interestingly enough, a lot of people's dreams were about their fears. A lot of fears in America. And it was fantastic because all of my dreams are about my fears. And this is some scenes of the film, because then she takes these dreams to an Iranian colony that secretly interprets Americans' dreams. Listen, we can be talking for a day, but this is a very expansive project. And so we created this absurd, Kafkaesque space where all these Iranian people in uniform were busy interpreting and analyzing Americans' dreams. And the extraordinary landscape of the Southwest, what's beautiful about America. But she was Iranian. And the fury, yeah. I wanted to talk to you about that because it's very confusing. And I think for many people who watch this video, and maybe some of you have, this question of the woman at sometimes, moments, she feels very desirable, and she seems like she is enjoying the dance, that she is being seductive. Many of the ladies in prison, in order to be freed, who knows what they have to do. I have had friends who fell in love with her interrogator, who eventually confessed that she had sexual relationship. But this is a fiction. But in my mind, it was a woman who was programmed to satisfy her interrogators for survival. So at the beginning of the video, and I don't want to tell you the story, it is a woman that is entertaining a man in uniform, and you're not sure if she's doing it intentionally or by force. And even when she's outside, she doesn't connect. This is what happens with people who are traumatized, that slowly go mad in a way that they can never really cope with reality as we do. And for me, it was, even when she was outside, the inside, inner and the outer world didn't connect. Like sometimes I'm in Brooklyn, walking where I live, and I'm listening to Persian music, and I'm looking at all the Hispanic people, 90% of the people coming from Central and South America, and they're listening to their own music, and I feel completely displaced. So I brought that part of my experience. But in this case, she never really connects to people. And then when she's in her own private space, she starts having flashback. I don't have images of that. But this idea how the dance turns into space of violence. Oh, I won't get into this. I've also made 3 movies. I'm going to go really fast. It was shown here, and I think this film was the biggest 6 years of my life spent on a book by Shahnush Parsipur, a beloved Iranian author, one of the most important women writers, but spent years in prison, was institutionalized because of mental illness, and lives in poverty today. And it really took a lot to take this book. As you can see, I'm very attracted to surrealism, dreams, and this is magic realism. It's a very difficult literature to turn into a movie. But we took a lot of time. We recreated Iran in Morocco, basically, of 1950s. And the latest film called Land of Dreams, so the photography, the video, then Sheila Van played the role of an Iranian woman in New Mexico, collecting. It's very complicated. You can watch it in Amazon, everywhere. But my love with movies is that, you know, it's not made for museums or galleries, that people can buy a ticket and go see it or watch it at home. But also the idea of writing a script taking a few years. In this movie, I worked with Matt Dillon, Isabella Rossellini. We had William Mosley. We had very great actors, again shot in New Mexico. Very stylized and very dreamy, very dreamy. All of the films go to film festivals and movie theaters, and these are some of the scenes. I'm so sorry. I mean, it's a long years I've been working, so this is, I think, the last image of my presentation. And I just want to explain, actually, it's a good note to, now stuck. I want to go to the last image, which was the photographs of the last scene of the movie Land of Dreams, or the photographs that I took in New Mexico. And it's, yeah, next one. Yeah, I just wanted to advance to the next picture, but it doesn't matter. I'm at the end of my presentation, if you can. It's just one more picture. But anyway, photography, video, and the very last thing, I'm doing opera. So and don't ask me why, but I'm catching up for all that. Now it's your turn to ask me questions. Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry.
Thank you, Shirin. It's really a very, very impressive body of work you have created during the years. Asking about the Fury, I think that many of us, it might come as a surprise that this body of work was actually shot before the current events in Iran. Could you tell us a little bit how, you have already started speaking, but how did that series come to be? And when you saw the upcoming situation, how was your feeling towards that?
Yeah, maybe some of you don't know, but I was attacked immediately when this work was coming out, because many people thought that I was being very opportunistic and I was making this work as a way of being sensational. But in reality, as I told you, I'd been immersed in this subject about sexual assaults against women's body, you know, a while ago. And it's, you know, it's very interesting because something about history and Iran, like we're talking about the woman of Allah, it reminds me of the Fury, the two very most controversial and contested work that I've done so far. And I understand now why I moved toward video and movies, because when you make work that an Iranian or non-Iranian looks at it and immediately connects it to their opinion, relationship to the subject, it's hard to look at it as a work of art. And I can see the emotions are so high with Iranian people, and if they don't know an artist and they don't know your intentions or your sincerity, I can see that it becomes a kind of a character assassination. And the fact that also I don't live in Iran, and I've never claimed to be speaking the truth. My work is very stylized. As I said, it's surrealistic. It's very impressionistic. I'm not interested in realism. So many people who are not used to looking at art, but are exchanging images in social media, misunderstanding and misinterpreting what is really the artist, or they hadn't even seen the work, in fact. But I think this is a part of being an Iranian artist today, that you in some ways accept criticisms from the Islamic Republic of Iran, to the people of Iran, to the Western critics, and you understand, because the work is politically charged, there's no way you can free yourself of judgment. Even if I make a very abstract video like Rapture, still it's about gender, it's about discrimination. So, of course, it's very upsetting when you feel that your work is misunderstood, but over the years I have learned to be very patient and respectful and tolerant of people's different opinions. But I think the fact that the last thing I wanted to say, the women of Iran are not victims, but Mahsa Amini was a victim. And her death provoked our revolution, unleashed our rage. And this is exactly what this video does. This woman is a victim, but at the end, you saw in the protest that the mere seeing this woman violated provoked people who are not even Iranian, but there's humanity in them that shares her pain. So my idea was that every time we have a victim, we see someone's pain, it provokes something in us as human beings, regardless of where we come from, whether it's Ukraine or Iran or South America. And that universality of the sexual assaults and violence through people of power is not unique to Iran. And we are affected by it. But many people interpret it as if I'm saying all the women of Iran are dancing like this in front of uniformed men, or I'm saying they're victims. It's not at all. All of my work always characterized Iranian women as powerful. Never, ever as losers. Never. Either a photograph, a movie, they've always been protesting and fighting. Repressed, but fighting. And so I could never be accused of depicting Iranian women as victims. But it takes sometimes a victim such as Mahsa Amini to see where it brought us today.
And would you like to, one of your tools that you're working with is calligraphy. And that's a very time-consuming, delicate process. And you're also joining that with the words of the poet, Forough Farrokhzad. Could you tell me a little bit more about what is it with the calligraphy? How does that speak to you, and what does that add to the layers of your images?
I'm really glad you asked that, because in my work, often we just talk about the content, but there is something about aesthetically that now that I look back in Women of Allah to the video work, to the latest work, I think all my work are in a way an elaboration of Persian and Islamic art in the way that text and image is integrated. Think about Persian miniature paintings. Think about the architecture of the mosque. Think about our carpets. Think about the Quranic. We have always a way of integrating text. And remember, in my house, when I looked in the ceiling, there was poetry written, either sacred text or only poetry. And for years, being raised as an Iranian, obviously, in my brain, there is this, I gravitate toward that kind of aesthetic. Not only calligraphy, but the idea of symmetry, harmony, repetition, abstraction, void. These are all the quality of Islamic art, Persian art. My composition, you know. And so I'm not a good calligraphist, but calligraphy is an important part of classic Persian arts. And I feel somewhat a pride of being able to revive something so classical in something so contemporary in terms of subject. And I am a photographer that belongs to contemporary Western arts. I am influenced by other photographers. I'm influenced by video artists and filmmakers. So my work is still experimenting with the medium of photography, but I'm bringing with me something from my culture. So I think it's like music, it's like Persian music in my video. It's the same thing, it's keeping alive something so beautiful, but very ancient and sometimes contemporary poet. I've used Rumi or Ferdowsi, but it's a kind of a subconscious way of me identifying with something that I take a lot of pride from my culture.
Shirin, I will open the floor for a few questions. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question to Shirin?
I think I scared everyone.
Yes. Good. So, is there anything in your work or in your future plans that you feel that we haven't touched upon here today that you would like to share?
Well, I want to, because this seems like a very intimate gathering, and I'm so glad that we have people from Iran, from different places here. To me, art is really about provoking emotions. Really, it's all about emotions. And I think I'm a very emotional person, and when I look at work of art, film, music, I want to be moved. And I think, for me, anything I make, and I'm thinking about the next project that I'm working on, is a continuation of the same thing. I want to make things that are beautiful, painful, disturbing, provocative, and deeply emotional, and sometimes funny. And I think that's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask. The idea of intersection of beauty and violence, and political subjects, and mysticism and spirituality, and music and calligraphy, yet pain. All of this duality, all of this paradoxical, I think, is the very nature of who we are. And so I feel that I am myself a person who is extremely weak and self-conscious and vulnerable and fragile, and yet I feel very strong and confident and hopeful. And so I think as long as this path, in terms of the sincerity of the artist to why you're making what you're doing, then there's something safe. Because I'm not doing this to impress or to make a lot of money. I'm doing it because I don't know why I'm doing it. It's a good question. Maybe I should stop. It's a therapy.
I just wanted to pick in a question about the music in the film down in the Forough exhibition, because there is a beautiful story behind that.
Say that again?
In the film, in the music in the film,
Oh,
there
yes.
is a story.
A very good question. Thank you, because many of my Iranian friends would know. I worked with Amel Mahlouti, she's Tunisian, but I was really interested how she took Sultana Qalbam. It's a very famous Iranian song, which oddly enough, we made this film again way before Woman Life Freedom, but this is the song that Nika, who was killed, a young, beautiful, innocent girl, sang, and everybody now is reminiscent about this song. But Amel, who's Tunisian, a long time ago fell in love with this song, but then she wrote Arabic lyric to this. She took out the Persian lyric, and she wrote the lyric about dream of freedom for Palestine. And I saw a video of, and I really recommend you do that, and you go and check her on YouTube. It's called Holmes, Holms. She sang this song with Persian in Arabic, and I was weeping. I was truly weeping. And we seeked each other out in New York. I went to see one of her concerts, and so she did the music, but we had to, of course, work around this, and she had to re-record it. And the music was also done with my stepson, who's also Iranian. And many people criticized, saying, oh, but it's a Persian song, it should be in Farsi. And I said, no, it should be Amel. It should be, again, working on a video that to me is transcultural. It's okay, it's Arabic. And she just went to Palestine, and I think she did a performance. And oddly enough, during the movement, revolution, Women Life Freedom, a lot of Iranian people discovered Amel because of this song. I really recommend you bring her here to do a concert. Oh, she sang at the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
But it was in Norway, I think.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So we will be here and welcome down to the exhibition to explore it, take time. If you have the opportunity to come back later and feel it many times, I would really recommend that. And if there are no questions, I will say thank you so much for this evening. It's really lovely to have you here. I wish you a great weekend, and thank you so much, Shirin.
So glad I came.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for... Oh.
I would just start by saying you're a very delightful woman, I have to say. You inspire me. You're very inspirational.
Thank you.
But there was one question I had with regards to the absence of color in your body of work.
A good question.
Could you elaborate on maybe why you don't use much color, or is there a reason why you sort of stick to black and white or more?
That's a really good question. I find color very pretty and seductive. In the movies, sometimes we have to make movies in color because nobody distributes it. But I think there's a severity about black and white because, like I said, much of my work is about this duality, this contrast, this opposite, this paradoxical. And that duality is somehow further accentuated from black and white, where I think if it's color, you notice the different nuances. But with black and white, it's like that. But there's one other thing. There's something very timeless about black and white, which I love some of Bergman's films that are black and white, because you really can't guess what period was this shot, you know? Time becomes irrelevant. Where when it's color, you think about, oh, what she's wearing and this, and with black and white, it's just sort of, it just goes above, you know? It goes above time and place, and yeah, I'm a black and white person.
And yet so colorful when you're here. Yeah.
See, that's very colorful. But thank you for being such a great audience, and thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everybody in this. I just wanted to share with you one thing, and I told Pauline that when I thought about this crazy project, we were just brainstorming, and somehow I got introduced to Fotografiska, and I just showed them a mood book. And they took the risk of coming on board. No institution usually does that before the work is finished. And I knew this was a big risk because it could have been it could still be very controversial. But they trusted me and also supported me some in making it. And I'm very grateful because for an artist, it's very heartwarming when people come to you at the earliest stage, not after. So thank you for your trust.